Amazing story in his own right, but I fell in love with the story. I fell in love with the men and women who made the story. I got to meet Buck for the first time in 1993, and I tell people all the time, once you met Buck, it was all over. You were bitten by the Buck bug. That was it. You wanted to be on Buck's team. You saw the passion. You saw the charisma. You saw this love and the desire to make sure that these men were never forgotten and that this story would live on. And we knew from the onset that it was literally a race against time. The people who made this history at some point were all going to be gone.
Right.
The people who saw them play at some point were all going to be gone, but their story certainly deserved greater credence. It deserved to stand the test of time. And so I wanted to be down with the rest of the guys who were involved and wanted to build a museum. At that time, it was really a dream. It was, and this is the first phase of a dream come true to build this current home. We're now expanding our operations into the old Paseo YMCA, the birthplace of the Negro Leagues.
That's where they first signed the document for the league,
That's where they signed the documents. Right? And that is going to become the Buck O'Neil Education and Research Center. So we've been rehabbing that old historic landmark now for several years. We've gotten the first floor complete, and we're just steadily, phase by phase, working on the rehab of that building, and ultimately that will be the Buck O'Neil Education and Research Center.
Which was a big part of Buck when he was around. It was always about the kids.
It was always about the kids, and it was always about education. And this was from a man who was the grandson of a slave, who lived long enough. Well, and matter of fact, he was a part of change, and they lived long enough to enjoy that change.
Right.
But at the forefront of his existence was always education. You know, he was denied an opportunity to go to his native Sarasota high school, but he always understood what the importance of an education was. And like men of that era, found ways to educate themselves. You know, Buck had 2 years of college at Edward Waters College. He got his high school diploma from Edward Waters, and then ultimately had 2 years of college before the love of baseball and the money lured him away from college.
If I remember correctly from what I've read, he had every intention, and then when he finally went to his dad, and his dad was like, well, if you're making that much, just go back.
Yeah. You know, now Mama wanted him to go to school, but Daddy said, I got a baseball player, he making some money. Yeah, and so, but Mama wasn't too happy about that.
That's right.
You know, because Mama wanted to get that education because you knew baseball, you could only play baseball for so long, but Buck was very fortunate and blessed. He made his living in baseball for over 7 decades. And
was the first black Major League Baseball coach for the Cubs.
1962 with the Chicago Cubs. Of course, he became a groundbreaking scout, and as a scout, signed Hall of Famers Ernie Banks and Lou Brock to their first professional contracts, hopefully future Hall of Famers in Joe Carter and Lee Arthur Smith to their first professional contracts. So he had a sensational eye for talent. He was a great manager, great coach. He could have been the first black manager in baseball had he been given the opportunity. When the Cubs had that crazy college of coaches where they rotated guys to become managers, well, when it got to be Buck's term, they didn't let him on the field. Because if you let him on the field, you probably weren't going to get him off. You know, George Altman, the legendary Negro Leaguer, and then had a wonderful career in the major leagues, then goes over to Japan and has a rebirth of a career, still says today that Buck O'Neil was the greatest manager he ever played for. He knew men, he knew the game, but more importantly, he understood those men, and he knew how to get the absolute most out of them. Yeah, and he had great talent play for him, but he also brought out the best of those guys that weren't necessarily the superstar players. And people would always ask him, well, how did you manage Satchel? Well, first of all, nobody managed Satchel. You know, Satchel was his own guy now. But as Buck O'Neil would oftentimes say, you know, the art of managing superstars came down to the ideology and understanding that you can't expect a thoroughbred to act like a mule. They just don't. And so he understood that, and he was able to get those guys. You're not going to manage them all the same. You know, you're not going to treat them all the same because they're just not. And so,
not that this is a baseball team, but I mean, I can imagine, like, as a head coach, look what he did for you. You came in here as a volunteer.
As a volunteer, man.
And look what he got out of, you know?
Absolutely.
I mean, it seemed like you got managed.
Absolutely. And didn't even know it. and didn't even know it, doggone it. You know, but I tell you what, man, what a blessing for me to have had the opportunity to spend so many years with Buck. And I go back to the summer of 2005 and what ultimately became the fodder for a great book written by Joe Posnanski called The Soul of Baseball, A Road Trip Through Buck O'Neill's America. And I remember the summer of 2005 quite vividly as Buck and Joe and myself were gallivanting all over the country. And we were all lamenting the fact that we were gone from home so much and we were on the road so much that summer that our significant others or our wives weren't going to let us back in the house. And now when I look back after he's gone, it was the greatest summer of my life.
Oh man,
we spent the summer on the road with Buck O'Neill.
That's great.
And they paid me to do it. Now they ain't paid me much, but they paid me to do it. You know, and how good was that? And Joe, obviously, the book was a Casey Award-winning book when it was released in 2008, so Buck never got to see the book. Buck passed away in 2006, but it was such a well-written book. But I tell people all the time, you know, you got one of the greatest human beings to ever walk the face of this earth in Buck O'Neill, and Joe, in my opinion, one of the great writers of the 21st century. So it had to be a great book. And as it turned out, it was an outstanding book.
It's a book that you finish and then you immediately want to start back up again because you start thinking of stories and you're like, wait, which story was? And you want to make sure the stories, you get the stories right. And it's listeners definitely go online and find that book. It's incredible.
Yeah. You know, if you're so inclined, we have it in our shop. You can go to nlbm.com.
Yeah, there you go. That's where you go online.
Yeah.
Say it one more time.
nlbm.com, Negro League Baseball Museum.com. And it's available online. It is an easy read. It is an inspirational read. You're going to laugh. You're going to cry. You know, it's a little bit of everything. And Buck O'Neill, who I never saw anyone who was so, I don't know, just people excited him. And he excited them. And we would go places, and even if they didn't know who he was, they were drawn to him. And we would sit in the airport and he would start a conversation because he never met a stranger in his life. And by the time we were going to our respective gates, they're sharing an embrace like they've known each other all their lives. That was Buck O'Neill. He somehow bridged the gap between black and white, men and women, young and old, unlike anybody I ever saw in my life.
I was at Chavez Ravine at a Dodgers game last season, and I'm wearing my Royals shirt, and I walk out, and this husband and wife are like, oh, Kansas City, you know, oh, we love Kansas City. We met Buck O'Neill. That was the second thing out of their mouth. We met Buck O'Neill, and then they're like, that guy was so great, and then my mom met him one time at the airport 20 years ago, and you know, and every time someone has met, was lucky enough to meet Buck O'Neill, that was now etched in their memory
and
forever.
I think for some folks it was life altering to have that opportunity to meet Buck and draw from that inspirational, the wisdom, but that fact that Buck seemed to just love so unassumingly. Didn't matter. He didn't see color. He just saw people, and he just had this universal love for everyone. People would ask me all the time what I remember most about Buck, and for me it was quite simple. You always felt better leaving Buck than you did when you came to see him.
Aren't those good people?
Yeah.
They're few and far
They're
between.
too far and few. We need a whole lot of Buck O'Neill right now in this country. We could use it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's and can you believe we're already right here at this?